Hello, everyone. Uh, Welcome to episode 14. I'm smiling because this one's going to be a lot of fun. This one is unique. This is a little different than what we've done in the past, and that's really exciting. It's been an amazing journey bringing these webinars to everybody, but it's always a lot more fun when there's more people involved. I don't do a lot of talking in these, and that's on purpose because you didn't come here to hear me. You came here to hear about the tools or about a particular method. And so it's just my job to add some color and some perspective and keep things moving along and monitor for questions and so on. But this time we brought in a couple of other people to join me so that we can get a real conversation going. We may not do any screen sharing. There are no slides. And it really is about having a frank discussion about a topic that is critically important to everybody who's interested in these tools and using these tools within the workflows of their day-to-day work, their business. And so the topic is show your work. And I'm going to let Drew, everybody's going to introduce themselves individually. It's always easier that way. They can tell you about themselves more than me reading something off a piece of paper. But Drew will set us up as far as how this got started and how we decided to bring in the people that we decided to bring in for this conversation. And so with that, Drew, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Drew Deitch. I work at Relativity with Jim, who's also on the line, and we have a product called Relativity Patents. Some of you have heard us talk about it on this digital forum before. But as Tony said, today's session is going to be a little unique, and I'll just give you the background to how it came to be. So now I'm trying to remember that it was probably May or June. We had a conference in DC, a group that probably a lot of people know of, PIUG. And Tony and I were meeting up there to actually talk about like what was the next webinar we wanted to do and sponsor on his series. And in that conference, there was a session, and I'm going to let Dominic and Jane introduce themselves, but the session was led by Dominic. It was Patent Searching 101. Jane asked a question about how we can show our work and kind of defend our decisions and prove we did a good job when the tool we're using is a machine learning or AI-based tool. And so that's the discussion for today. When it came up in the room, it was the most excited and passionate debate I have ever seen at a midday lunch session at a conference. Like, people were out of their chairs. It was super healthy, and the debate was led by these two experts who are going to introduce themselves next. And so right after that, I went to Tony and I was like, hey, that was really cool and energizing. Like, should we just try and do that? Like, try and like rerun that discussion for a broader audience. And so that's what we're gonna do today. I think our perspective from Relativity will be the vendor's perspective. Like, how do we build a better tool for hardcore data people, patent people that want to use machine learning? I think everybody who comes to ML for Patents wants to use machine learning. But sometimes there's a blocker, like, hey, I can't explain exactly how we got to the result we got. I know it's good, I know I trust it, but I need to be able to prove that. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We really hope people from the audience will chat to us and ask questions and push us, because we've got some really good experts here, but it's not a closed question. There is no final answer yet. So that's what we want to explore today. And we hope that as vendors and product people, that we'll leave here with 3 or 5 really good ideas for how to make this easier for all of you. So with that, I would hand it to let's see, I'll hand it to Dominic first, since it was his session.
All right, thank you, Drew. So this was, I guess I'll set the stage. We were in May having our first in-person meeting in, oh my goodness, like 2 years. So everybody was, a little nervous, a little trepidatious. Volume was a little lower than we want because, of course, people are still concerned about traveling. But the conference organizers decided that they should have an introductory level course. A lot of the times we have these meetings and we all jump right into hardcore heavy stuff. And they were like, okay, let's do something that's a little bit more, get everybody on the same page. And that's, so I was allowed to speak. And that's where, so I run a patent search firm. We do DeMarco IP, we do patentability, clearance, litigation support, landscaping work. I've been doing this for 25 years, and for the last 15 years, I've been one of the lead instructors on teaching the subject matter of patent searching. And that's, it's the fundamental building blocks of what we do. You run Boolean queries, you use your text searching, your citation analysis, classification codes are very, very important. They're the lifeblood in the engineering world. And for the last decade, we've had these, I'm going to talk too much. I'm sorry, Jane.
No, you're doing well.
Yeah, no, but so, and for the last decade, we've had these new tools coming in, whether they're called, automated semantic analysis, machine learning, AI, whether it's the find prior art button on Google, whether it's a black box, whether it's less of a black box. We have these new tools that are rapidly becoming what we call the fourth leg of our chair. It's always been a tripod: classification, text, citation data. And now we have this fourth leg of magic, for lack of a better term. And it's becoming increasingly important that we use these tools, not exclusively, but as one of the four methodologies we integrate into our practices. And so I was doing a presentation, and I did a super simplistic stuff. It's like, okay, let's start a search. I'm looking for a Teflon coated light bulb. And you start, okay, let's look for Teflon, in the same sentence as light bulb, and in titles, and you start there. Then you expand and you show people how okay, let's try this strategy. Let's try this strategy. Let's try this strategy, which for the real nerds out there is a real-time application of the no free lunch theorem, which is, you don't know where you're going to find your best art until you've tried a little of everything. And then you can go, oh, this is what's working best. Let's follow that path. And we got to the point where I said, okay, now I'm going to toss it into my similarity engine. You pop it into Similarity. I said, okay, the engine that I was using kicks out 500 references. Well, I don't want to look at 500 references in the early part of a search. So I said, okay, I'm going to look at the first 50 because they're relevancy ranked by this magic box. And I don't know how they rank them. I don't know how they find the 500. I don't know how they choose the first 50. But, and then Jane shoots her hand up and she's like, well, how do you document that? And then somebody else raises their hand and starts screaming and yelling, well, this is how I do it. And that's where things got a lot more interesting because, we have this adaptive and iterative process, and the way we differentiate ourselves as professionals versus, Tom, Dick, or Harry just popping stuff into, the online search engine is by documenting our search strategy and showing the entire process. That's what clients are paying for. They're paying for that expertise. And that's also, if it ever goes to the point where litigation, somebody wants to sue me for not doing a professional search, I need to have this as my trail, my paper trail. And that's how you show your professionalism. And so then we were struggling with, how do I show when all I'm doing is taking 10 numbers and popping it into an engine and just going, I don't know what the hell it's doing. And then so Jane was jumping in. So go ahead, Jane, your turn.
Yeah, thanks, Dominic. That was a super introduction. So yeah, from my perspective then, I know you've had bio, etc. So I've worked in the industry for a very large number of years, have a lot of expertise both as a searcher and as a developer. Actually, I've worked on the development side as well, so I have quite a broad perspective. I also don't only do patent searching, I also do non-patent literature searching. I particularly do medical devices regulatory searching. And I think partly my question actually, it was perhaps kind of triggered by Dominic's point about the similarity search, a different engine, but actually I think it actually applies to all our searching. I don't think it only applies to the modern similarity tools. I think it's actually a question overall, because I think although we have the feeling that we understand Boolean, in fact, and we therefore know what the string means and what the proximity is, in fact, each tool that we use has different ways of implementing those. So we quite possibly also aren't fully aware in any case of how we got the document. But also, yeah, so to go back to the meeting, yeah, it was exactly as Dominic said, it was like the first meeting we've had for 2 years in person. So I think, and because there were perhaps fewer people, we were super energized to have a discussion. And for me personally, coming over from the UK to the US, I always feel that I'm in a group of peers who are experts, and it's just marvelous to have that level of discussion with people who you know are on the same page as you, and that's quite rare because it's a bit of a niche pastime, searching patterns. And so to be in the same room with people who share that expertise and also passion is great. And we did have some really good discussions. But I think not only for tools like Relativity and IP Rally and other tools that are out there, and all the vendors actually are bringing in similarity search options. Over and above those, we need to have best practice of how to report our results, and not only how to report results, but also how to track what we're doing when we're actually searching. And the decisions that we make are also super important. So I think it's potentially quite a broad discussion. I'm really glad that you've taken it up, Drew, and thanks for the invite. And I think it's really good to have this discussion again and perhaps go into more detail.
Yeah, I love it. I want to let Jane and Dominic, thank you both so much for the overview. I think that was perfect. I want to let Jim introduce himself quickly, and then maybe we can jump into like the question that you raised first, Jane, which is, what does good look like for showing your work or reporting on the search that was done? But maybe Jim, let's start with you and then jump into it.
Yeah, awesome, thanks. I'm Jim. I lead up the product and engineering side of Relativity Patents, and just hearing this setup is awesome, because I think for us, top of mind is making sure that we're building efficient tools that provide clarity, that provide quality results. And it's really interesting to get your take in terms of, how do we prove this? So I'm really interested to see how this conversation goes, and thanks for having me today.
Yeah, maybe to start with, before we get into the black box of machine learning and AI similarity scores, with the basics, with the first three legs of your stool, Dominic and Jane, what do your clients want and expect as far as the reporting on what was done, and how important is that?
Drew, before we get into that, there's one other thing I wanted to add to this.
Sure.
So I was in the room for that conversation as well, and a bigger issue here beyond keeping track of what was done is the idea of transparency overall. And I think that's something that we're going to be coming back to more and more. And I've talked to a dozen or more different vendors in the space at this point, and everybody says just about the same thing. The biggest barrier to activation with regards to implementation is the conception that this is a black box, and that it is difficult or impossible to be able to ascertain why the system worked the way that it did. And it's been my experience that for the most part, that's a falsism. That's a myth that has been propagated throughout the discussion. And if I'm to be blunt, it's a little bit of laziness, in the sense that, well, yes, it's a little bit complicated to explain. There's varying degrees of how much you want to get into it, but if you take the time to understand a little bit about how these things work and how they generate, with the representations, they're called vectors normally, how is a document broken into its component pieces so that it can be analyzed in the first place. There's little nuances that yeah, if you really get into the weeds, can get really super complicated. There's a lot of math involved, but you don't even need to do that. I give the example with an NMR machine. When I was a chemist, when I worked at the bench, I knew how to take an NMR spectrum. I knew how to interpret an NMR spectra. I didn't know how to build an NMR machine. All right. I didn't need to be an engineer. I didn't need to understand everything about how it worked. I just needed to know how it worked and how it could help me do what I needed to do. And so we're going to also talk a little bit about transparency and about working with these things, because that's part of, I think, of the documentation involved, is that you understand what's happening at a certain level and how the system and how the tool is going to allow you to do that. So with additional little bit of context, Drew, go ahead and repeat that question again, please.
No, yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think we should come back and define what is a vector and all the other things. But I'm personally, so like, I'm not a patent searcher, right? I'm a legal tech person and a salesperson. Jim's not a patent searcher; he's a product person. So we've been trying to help customers for a long time to solve problems in this field and others. But I think there's probably a shared understanding on some people, maybe not all on the call, of like what is expected for that report, whether you used AI tools or not, ML tools or not. I was just hoping for like the short version of, Dominic mentioned this is what they're paying for, right?
Yeah.
What are they paying for? What's the report look like?
So what I'll actually use is the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office as the example, because let's be honest, in the United States, they're the largest search organization that exists. And they actually lead the world in documenting what they've done. I will give incredible kudos to the USPTO for doing so. And they've been doing it for over 20 years. So what they were working originally with was the very first generation of automated machine learning. It wasn't actually machine learning. It was, as Tony will get angry at me for using, the black box, because it wasn't a system with dials and levers and adaptability. It was it was called the plus system, and it scanned the specification and gave the examiner 50 references. And they were, it used whatever algorithm it used. But in the examiner file history, it would have a sheet, an 8.5 by 11 PDF that was scanned in, and it would say the plus system, based on a review of the claims in light of the specification, has generated these 50 references for review by the examiner as being of potential relevance. So boom, there's 50 references that it's identified. And as I said, this was a first generation tool. This is well before all of the much, much, much better tools that exist now. But that was the first generation tool, and that's what they kicked out as their very, very transparent output. And then they would follow that up with 2 or 3 pages of their command line search language, where they would go, I'm searching class, because this is USPC and the USPTO, class 700, sub 36, combined with this keyword in titles and abstracts, and you would show 767 hits. And then what they should have done was said, okay, how many of those 767 did you go through? Where it was a line by line, here's the query I ran, here's what I did. A lot of my peers will complain with, just like I will, that they don't actually document which queries they've reviewed. They just lay it all out there and make it look long and elaborate. If you're an expert, you can read it and go, oh, okay, look at the timestamp. They definitely didn't do this. They definitely didn't do this. They definitely did this. All right, this one with 3 hits. Oh, they definitely went through those 3. But that's what our clients are paying for from us as well. Do they look at it? Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. It's a rare. I'll be honest. It's a rare end client that has the tools and ability to review our search logic. Even though they're paying for it, and even though they're asking for it, some of that's the CYA move, because that's a way to make sure that we're documenting what we did and are not overcharging them. And that's one of the concerns with a lot of the automated systems. If somebody gives me an invention disclosure document, which is a 1-pager, and I just pop it into Relativity, look at the first 3 references and go, boom, boom, I'm done. How do I justify sending them a $2,000 invoice? If I document that it took me 3 minutes to do the work, you better believe they don't want to pay $2,000. They want to pay for 3 minutes of Dominic's time.
Well, I think
so
that's another interesting point, isn't it? Are we paying for time, or are we paying for expertise?
Yeah.
But that's perhaps a different question. I'd like to sort of mention a couple of things, really. So one is not just how does the box work, but what is in the box. So we need to know content. We need to know the patenting authorities. Is it full text? Is it applications only? Is it granted patents only? And how far back in time does it go? There's many patent tools patent search tools have come on the market over the last 15 or so years that have got quite basic data and are claiming lots of things. So I think reporting is not our reporting anyway, it's your reporting to us. What is in that box? What can we hope to find? And another important thing of what is in that box is the dates. So not just the dates, like the oldest document, what is the newest document, and how is that document represented? Is it a full patent application? Or is it a half patent application? Have you got the classifications? Have you got everything in there? So, and those are things that are important to us to be able to check as well. Is there an audit? We need an audit trail of what was in there on any one particular day, so that if I do have to repeat a search, and I have to say that some of my clients do ask me to, what I've done, they do come back and say, oh, I see this, and I want to talk to you a bit more about that, and what did we find here? And therefore, I need to be able to go back and repeat my search and be pretty sure I'm going to get the same answers. So I think those like content and dates are important, and updating dates. And I think as well, I totally agree about transparency. And part of that goes with repeatability. We often need to repeat our searches and update them, not to get exactly the same results, but to get the new results. So we need to have a clear pathway to repeat that search and be confident that what we're going to get makes sense compared to what we had before. Because in our jobs, whether we're working in-house or as a search firm, we'll have repeat work to do, whether that's in monitoring an applicant, monitoring a technology area. So yeah, so those are some things, not about how the box works, but what's in the box in the first place.
A couple things also, and Jane, if you wanted to continue with a follow-on point, that'd be great. But yeah, I mean, during the session, I mentioned that I keep a OneNote notebook, and every single string I run is dialogued. Dominic's discussion about what did I do with it? Did I in fact keep it? Did I modify it further? You know, this word isn't working, I took it out. You know, all of that is great. It is funny though, very recently I started to take a look at, I guess it's not Patent Center. What's the new search tool for the USPTO, Dominic? You're on mute, boo, buddy.
That's good. The one that replaced public pair, or do you mean the new search tool?
I mean the new
search. It's just search. It's their replacement for East.
Yeah, the APFT and the separate application versus grant databases. Yeah. And you can see that it must be based on something that they've been using internally for a while, because the way that it lays out with the windows and the way that it has the history and even the exact formatting of how it's laid out and the timestamps and everything you talked about looks exactly like the items that you would find in a file wrapper. And so, Dominic, with your experience, working so closely and at the USPTO for so long, that must be something you're very, very familiar with because you've seen it. But for the rest of us, we never really had access to that type of tool from them. And so when I saw it, I'm like, wow, this explains a lot about how they do things.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I'll tell you, it's that tool that they put on the web is their internal tool, and it's been internal for a couple of years, and even before that, their internal tool, which was East before that, uses the exact same command line language and exact same BRS queries. So for the examiners, it was a very seamless transition from East, the examiner automated search tool, to their new tool, which has the wonderful title of Search. But it's the exact same interface for the examiners, which is this incredibly customizable interface, user interface.
I want to go back actually to 2 points Jane made, but so I think Jane, 2 things you said for those that weren't in this original session, but I can picture our audience here like, leaning forward in their seats as they heard what you said. One, these were the things that I think really stirred the pot and got people excited when I was first listening to this conversation. One was your point of what's in the box. I mean, I think it seems to me like a lot of professional searchers have a lot of overhead in context switching because each database has slightly different, dates, parameters, which text is included in which query, and that's just like mental load you have to keep in mind as you look at the results. And the other one was the audit trail. I mean, people really seemed, I'll use the word frustrated, that there are a lot of these machine learning tools that when you run the same query a week or 2 weeks later, the results are different. And it's not because of new publications, it's because of something else. And that's where I think, yes, it is a vector, the scores are, viewable, but, that's where people come up with the term black box when they feel that they're running the same thing and they're not getting the same results. Now, some systems like don't have that issue. I don't think relativity patents does, but there are other trade-offs. Like we have a point in time view, but if you come back and run it later, you'll have to like do some digging to understand what was different from what's different in the, like what's been published when you're running it next time. So I'm curious, you know, I think there is real desire, especially from this community, to use AI and machine learning either as part of the 4-part strategy or even as a primary. But those are the types of things that hold it back. So I'd love to hear from Jane and Dominic and Tony. I know you think about this all the time. What else is holding you back from making this a go-to? And maybe I'll just pause there. I probably will have follow-ups. What else is holding it back? There's audit.
So yeah, so for myself and my team, it's definitely the repeatability aspects. You know, when I run, you know, I almost always start every query with what I call the moron query, you know, the title of the invention. You know, I type it in and, you know, you look at the text, what other patents have that same title? Those should be a good starting place. You know, and then from there you learn. You know, you were in my little session. It's like a nice little circle. I guess the circle goes this way today. You know, where are you going with that information? And then when I get to say hour and 15 minutes into my search, that's a time when I might want to break in with my machine learning system. And I love a machine learning system that's adaptable, you know, where you're able to make the mechanical, you know, change the levers, adjust the dials, be able to say, you know, for my Teflon coated light bulb, stupid example, you know, I might want to say Teflon is one of the more important features. So I want Teflon to overweigh the light bulb aspects, you know, and then I might want threading to be a key aspect, even though I didn't type it in because it's an inherent feature in light bulbs. But I want, when I talk to the machine learning system, I want it to have threading. Like that has to be a, you know, and there needs to be a way for me to fix that dial shifting and lever adjusting and words or numbers that I put into my machine learning system, so that if I come back to it in 2 years when I'm getting called out and somebody, because you know mistakes happen and you need to have that audit trail, as Jane calls it. You know, somebody comes back to me and says, hey Dominic, you know, we submitted this application and they turned up this this X reference. You know, Europe found an X reference that you didn't find. Let's figure out why that happened. You know, so now I need to be able to do that audit and go, okay, here's what we did. Here's where we got to the machine learning box. Let's rerun that query. Was that reference one of the ones that was presented to me by the ML? You know, did relativity present that to me? You know, because I can look at the Boolean logic and I know why it wasn't found. I can look at the classification and know why it wasn't found. And citations is very, very repeatable. But I need to know, you know, did the machine learning system also miss that reference? Because right now, I use the machine learning systems as my personal CYA system. You know, I have methods that I've been using for 20 plus years. I love having an AI machine learning system to catch my mistakes. But I need to know that it actually is catching them. And I don't really know that until I am getting called out on things 2 or 3 years down the road.
Dominic, it almost sounds like you need multiple layers of auditability. Like one, you need to audit the searchable set. It's these dates. This is the date of the data set I'm going to be searching. It's within the results. This is the metadata I'm searching. If there's a way to say, okay, this is the model that was used behind the scenes from an ML perspective, this is what it looked like at this point in time. So it's not necessarily one audit trail, but there's multiple stacked audit trails essentially that you probably would need or would be helpful to be able to go back years down the road and say, this is how we got to this answer set essentially. Is that
right?
fair?
And what I would love is for when you run that query, if there, or you know, with all your adjustments and saying sliders, if it could generate some type of alphanumerical character, it can be, you know, 37 characters long, I don't care, because I want to be able to record that somewhere. It doesn't even have to be in your system, but I want to have that 37 alphanumerical code that then I can pop in 4 years from now that would recreate this moment in time.
I get it.
And that's a big ask, you know, and not something that anybody actually wants to create, because the usage scenario is probably pretty low, but that would be something that would make me very happy.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And I think if I could just say a couple of things. I mean, I think I generally download my results as a spreadsheet any case. So I've got a snapshot, whatever tool I'm using, of what I want to record. I think that's, in a way, that is the same as your point of view, perhaps. I think in some ways, even if we can't, as I said at the beginning, I don't believe that anybody understands exactly how the Boolean or the proximity or whatever is working and exactly what it's going to get either. I think we have the impression that we do because we've been using it for a long time, we're familiar with it. So I think as long as we can say, on this day we searched and this is what we found, and so then we can come back in a week, in a year's time, and have proof that we found exactly that, either through a spreadsheet or your point of view. That's a good start, because that enables us to say, yes, we did find this. I think as well, it's rare. I mean, you want us to use your relativity or similar tools. That's what you're developing. But I think it's a rare patterns information person who uses only one tool. We're going to use a bunch of things, and we need to prove often absolute novelty. We're not going to do that just through one pattern search system. We need to be able to search very, very broadly. So I think we are more and more using the tools in our kit, in our toolkit, and that's how I see it, as we have toolkits and we'll search for them. And I mean, I repeat searches in 2 different databases regularly, and they rarely overlap. They usually overlap, but they rarely totally agree on returning the same document. So I think the transparency, the repeatability on an individual tool are important things for us to really come to. I think the reason that we need the 4th leg, if you like, is just because of the huge increase in volume of patents. We have huge numbers of patents, and half of them published every year are not in English, and we need to rely on machine translations. All of the same points that you're raising apply to machine translations, because they're repeated. The translations are run, they might be rerun, they might be updated by the machine learning. And how is that going to impact our results? Probably hugely. They may get better, we may get better results, but more targeted on our subject. But then if we want to repeat that, we're going to probably get different results, because the algorithm behind machine translation has been improved. And that's another date that we'd probably like to know, when the machine translation was done and when it was updated.
So
it's actually a really good point, Jane. Jim and I were just talking about this morning, actually. We had a real project with a customer yesterday that our similarities system brought back a Chinese reference. Machine translation was like not great, but you could tell that it was like something we should read. We found the US family member, and it's like, oh, this is definitely relevant. And neither showed up in the Boolean strings that we were, using to supplement the AI search. So I think that's, the intuition of someone who does this a lot, like that might not work well for, I think the user persona matters too, so we work a lot actually with attorneys before they decide whether or not to outsource a search and do a full-fledged search. They're doing quick and easy searching. Or as Dominic, you called it, not what was it? Not quick and dirty, but
fast and focused.
Fast and focused, right? So fast and focused searching. But what I think we hear from professional patent searchers is often, we want the lever and dial to move the weight of a subconcept above or below another subconcept. What I hear, and I think Jim too, from attorneys is slightly different. It's, we used your system, the best result was number 20, why wasn't it number 1? And I think both, we need to have transparency for both of those questions. Like, the hardcore person should be able to get under the hood and tune the dials exactly as they expect. But for the consumer of the ultimate report, or for an attorney user who doesn't consider their job to be searching, we need to be able to explain, look, It's just the words that go in, the context that they have, and the math that works out, why this is number 10 or 20 and not number 1. It's ultimately all in service of the expert making a decision. And we need to give people clues that, look, you do need to be able to go through more than just the top 5 to find what you need. And I think that's like a state-of-the-art struggle. Sometimes top knockout reference right at number 1, everyone's happy. Not always. And so how do we as vendors give context to the user about what to expect, right? Not just an explanation of what happened, but like how they should think about the results they're getting. Does it make sense, Tony?
Yeah. Well, let me clarify that. Not clarify, but let me expound upon that just slightly. Plus, we've got actually a fair number of questions, so I would like to take a few of those into account here because it's a lot of overlap, which is terrific because everybody's thinking along the same lines. But yeah, I mean, for instance, if you're using a support vector machine, all right, and you're saying that this particular patent number was one that the system came back with a median score, 50, so it couldn't really decide if it was relevant or not relevant in a binary classifier. And you decided as the user that I went ahead and I gave it an up thumb. All right, so I said it's relevant. And if there's even that level of exposure with regards to saying user-defined input to support vector machine model with patent number X. And again, you can get really convoluted if you said, well, when we looked at the vector, we decided, the system decided that it was this component of the vector that became more valuable and therefore was weighted more highly. And that's going to get into a whole mess that people are going to have a difficulty understanding. But even if there's just some discussion or some tracking of the fact this is what you did, you were looking at this patent number, you thought it was relevant when the system wasn't sure, and then you reran the model. You did that with 5 examples. These are the examples you used, and you reran it. And here's a document where the biggest score difference took place. And just a handful of things like that are directional would likely be really, really helpful, because that's the thing. That's why it's not reproducible. If the vector changes from session to session, out it goes. Everything starts over again. If there's a comparison that's being made and you start with a seed document, the first seed document, that sets the tone for everything else that's going on. And so if that seed changes, relatively speaking, they have similar results, but they're going to have different results. It's not going to be exactly the same because you're starting with a new document for the first comparison. Anyways, let me get to some of these, because a couple of these are great. One of them in particular, I think is really, really interesting. In addition to repeatability, the other challenge is being able to transfer the list of reviewed references in the AI tool into a regular database that, as professionals, we use not to waste time on reviewing the same data set again. This, I think, gets to the question or the point that these document IDs are critical. And more importantly than a patent number is a family number. So I do this all the time, where all these different comparative methods that I'm taking, and I have to take it out into Excel. And here's my list of family numbers I've already seen, and which ones were relevant, which ones weren't. And here's the new family numbers, and being able to get rid of those. So I think that's a great point. And the ability to not just see how the existing things have changed, but how you can easily then represent what the new stuff is. All right. Another one.
Tony, I think that also, it's in my mind, it's in my mental bucket, it's in the same bucket as Jane's point, which was we can do more as vendors to say, like, we get asked what family are we using? Is it DocDB or is it complex? Is it simple? Should be obvious.
Yeah,
and then we should be able to cover Jane on, oh, go ahead, Jane, please.
Oh, no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you through. Finish.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, like, if we have a US patent, maybe there's like somewhere it should be a right click or hover that says, how far back does our US data go versus our Great Britain data versus whatever that. So like, I think this is a constant tension frankly, for Jim's teams, which is the completeness or the complexity for the hardcore data person versus the usability for, the quick user, the attorney or the paralegal. And there's no right answer to that.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, and there's no right answers. And I'd like to come back on the relevance if there's time, but also I'd like to say that we can't even agree on families, really, which family we should look at. So I think that's another kind of variant.
Totally.
Yeah, families are crazy. I don't. Well, because I'm on record, you know, and because I don't like extended families. I don't like InfoDoc. And I've got scads and scads of reasons why I don't like it. But it
That
is
sounds like another podcast, Tony.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let me look at some. So somebody made it. This is, I think, is more of a, it's an observation. And this is interesting too, because I think it's a little counter to what we've heard in certain cases. The black box aspect does not bother me so much because my clients are attorneys, and most of what I do for them is, from their perspective, a black box or a magic wand, if you prefer. And so I think I wanted to make sure that got included in the conversation, because it is very much along the lines of, Drew, what you're talking about, the difference between, you know, an end user and a professional, and how we're each going to approach this. And Dominic, you mentioned this, at the very beginning, that nobody ever really looks at these things. And we talked about that too, and I'll share a very short, small story that now that I'm back in the corporate world, I am absolutely floored by the search histories and the search strings that I'm.
They're scary.
Yeah, no, it is, and I'm looking. I just, as a professional in this field, I like, you really made a decision based on that. It's most of the time it's not even there. So you really have to go searching to get somebody to give you even a summary of what they did, much less detailed of what they did. And then when you do get a chance to see it, it's like the cockroaches. They like, shh, somebody turn on the lights, and everything's scattered. So yeah, I mean, this is a big, important issue, and it turns out it's not just. And again, we sort of mentioned this. Jane mentioned this. It's not just the machine learning ones either. We really need to be holding ourselves to a higher standard as a profession. And so yeah, let's go ahead and continue, Drew. I mean, we've got 18 minutes, so we can certainly take another question. We can start to talk about another aspect of this. So go for it, Drew.
Do we have more questions?
Well, okay, so a lot of these are comments. Here's one.
The audience.
The way we can validate an AI-based search tool vis-a-vis a Boolean search traditional tool. This question came up a couple of times, and I don't know if we want to try and get into the means of comparing the results for the two. Is it worthwhile trying to compare the results of the two? I mean, we've done stuff. I mean, I've talked about the gold standard. The gold standard was an attempt to do that, where we had some defined good references and some defined close but not quite references. And so, I mean, what do you guys think about the idea of getting everything? Oh, well, Dominic, yeah, what do you think?
So in my world, Drew, as I referred to it as the fast and focused search efforts, I have a lot of projects where I only have 3 or 4 hours to do a complete search from start to finish. For whatever reason, that's what a client is asking for. And when I made that joke earlier of the no free lunch theorem, I don't know whether the machine learning system is going to be helpful or not helpful. But I also don't know whether classification is going to be helpful or not helpful. I have experience that teaches me, and a couple decades of experience doing these things. I have a general idea. I know what's going to be most helpful. But I've been shocked at how helpful integrating a machine learning AI system into my work process is, specifically on those very, very fast and focused efforts. I don't have time to type in a classification code and just go, okay, I'm going to go through all 4,000 references that pop up. That's just not feasible. And it might be something that really doesn't lend itself well to a simple text limiter. But I can put those conceptual ideas into a machine learning system and let it do its washing machine tumble and kick out 50 references. It's a minimal effort on my part. Especially when it's something where in the engineering space, you're often going through hundreds of references per hour, because all you're doing is, you want figures put up in front of yourself. And I don't care how those figures get put up in front of me, whether it's text-based searching, a machine learning system, classification code, citation, whatever, and I have found that to be very, very helpful in those Morpheus, those strange areas. And a lot of that's actually, which is good for you guys, because those are some of the areas that attorneys need the most help in, the mobile telecom, the networking engineering, anything in the systems engineering realms, all of the electrical engineering work. That art is just very, very difficult to search with the traditional tools. There's just too much of it. It's too ambiguous. There's no standardized nomenclature. The classification codes can't keep up with the volume of art. As Jane alluded to with the Chinese filings, the Chinese are the world leaders in some of this technology, and they are just flooding our systems with not tens of thousands of references, but millions of references. And you have to have an automated system to go through that. And that's a part where, as that one commenter put, I don't give a damn if it's a black box, because if it's putting good art in front of me and helping me do it in a timely fashion, that's it. I don't care where it comes from. So, it's definitely helpful.
Yeah,
Tom,
I
I
agree with quite a lot of that, and I think absolutely right that it's the engineering and devices fields that are really crying out for new tools, because we don't have Marcouche, we don't have structure search, we don't have much external classification apart from what's in the patent field. So, and we can't search what we need. We can't narrow down enough by words to what we need without having to go through so many documents. So I think that's super true. And I would agree that I'm happy. If I get a relevant document, I'm happy. I don't really mind where it came from. I'm going to put it into my report and say where it came from. And that's one reason, because of this, actually all the searches, I keep a project log and record what I've done and the decisions that I made. Because coming back to Drew's point about relevance is subjective, and relevance is going to change as you search as well. You're going to change your thinking. So I think, yes, I think that's important too. So the way I would report my black box result is I would put down that I've used that database, that search tool when I did it, and I would take a screenshot of what I found if there's no other reporting available, so I can see the documents are on that page that I chose from that were ranked. Because I think if you think going back outside of patent search, we all use Google all the time. We use Google Scholar, we use Google Patents, we use other ranking tools, and we don't know what's behind that ranking. There's not really a lot of difference. And those are hard to repeat because they're biased searches, and the biased is what is it based on? Yeah, so I think your point of what to expect is a good one, Drew. Like, what can people realistically expect, and explaining that. So I mean, I teach as well searching, and it's interesting really how many people there are out there who think that what the words they put in are definitely going to give them the documents they need. And again, I think that we all know that that's not necessarily going to happen for lots of different reasons.
Jim, you had a question? I have a comment, but I want to make sure you get your question.
Yeah, it was more along the lines of where Dominic was going, where I know based on my experience that this is going to be better for a concept search, or this is going to be better for a Boolean. But I'm curious if there's any way, or if you guys have thought of, like, even based on our experience, we may get results that we weren't expecting using method A versus method B. And if there's an opportunity for us to say, based on this type of a search or this type of use case or this type of workflow for, systems to sort of guide you in a sense, even though you are experts, if there's ever, an instance where you've sort of got results that you weren't expecting, and, if I would have done it a different way, I probably would have gotten something better. It's a little bit different take on transparency, but more or less, like, based on the inputs, we think this would be a best approach in terms of getting those results.
So one of the hardest things to do is take a step back and look and do that macro level analysis of your own workflow. I always talk about it as that's what you do overnight when you sleep, and you come back in the morning and you look at your work product with a fresh set of eyes. And that's when you recognize, hey, I've identified these 74 references as being relevant for this micro landscape. That's when you notice, hey, 27 of them are to this assignee, or 16 of them are in this classification code, or, oh my goodness, 2/3 of them were found by my machine learning tool. And when you're in the weeds doing the work, you don't recognize these very obvious things. I review my team's searches, and so it's like I get paid to notice those obvious things and go, hey, how come you didn't spend more time with with relativity? How come you didn't spend more time looking at this assignee? How come you didn't spend more time in this classification code? But if there was some way for the system to put its manager hat on, and do that macro level analysis of your result set and be able to queue up and say, hey, we notice that this term is showing up in your art and you've never used it. We notice that this classification code is showing up in your art and you've never used it. Because that's the hardest part is not getting fixated on the strategy that you've already come up with in your head that you're going to follow from A to Z, and stepping back, looking at it with a fresh set of eyes, going, holy crap, I might have missed some really good art because I didn't learn enough. I haven't adapted. And that's because it's very difficult, and the more you know a technology, actually, the less likely you are to be adaptive.
Yeah, I think that's really fantastic. Because the comment I was going to make along those lines is, I've been talking for some time that we really need to separate recall from precision. We can increase recall fairly easily, but our precision then drops out the bottom of the floor. And this is a little bit like what Dominic's talking about as well. It's a little different take on it. But if I could take and maximize my recall using that sort of a method, for instance, and then at the end of that process, be able to then use the machine learning tool to help me with my precision, to be able to then say, okay, here are 10 records I know are great. Here are 10 records that I know in that collection that came back that aren't so great, and begin the iterative process of increasing my precision by using the tool. The idea of separating them is important. So just a couple of things that you guys can take away to think about for the product. I do want to mention there's a couple of things in here that have come in the comments, which I think are really interesting along these lines. This comment in particular, and then there's another one that's an actual question or a suggestion that I think is relevant as well. But this one, this person is saying, what I like about Relativity's search tool development direction is the ability to combine a series of AI queries with Boolean search queries. For me, this is a great path forward. And so that's a comment that they made to you. Here's the question that's related. When using an ML-based system that is trained with seed documents to ultimately classify patents, do you think you could verify how good the trained algorithm is by using Boolean searching? So do you guys want to address how your tool works currently with being able to then take the results back and be able to then use some more traditional methods to spot check what was found?
Yeah, I mean, basically I'm using two different methods, apples and oranges, essentially, right? Concept search and keyword search, but how can I use them to essentially cross-validate each other, or at least validate, the conceptual search with the keyword? Right now we are combining the two, so that they're absolutely right, the person who posed the question. But I don't know if we have a way of actually like validating within the system today. It's more from a user's perspective to bring those two different worlds of searching together, two of the legs of the stool, if you will. But it is an interesting idea to say, with this input, would you get the same results, or would you get that? So sort of flipping that paradigm on its head with, start with a keyword and then maybe get or Boolean, and then do a concept search and see if those results are coming back. So I think it's an interesting take on the direction of a search from when you initiate it.
Yeah, I would say, well, first of all, I'd say thank you to the user and the audience.
Yeah.
We love our Relativity Patents users. And you're totally right. I think our vision at Relativity is not to do away with Boolean searching. It should be what our real vision is. You should be able to use the conceptual and the other types of machine learning queries alongside Boolean without it feeling like an extra step. You know, even Tony, I just now I caught you saying, you know, then I want to go back and do, you know, a different machine learning workflow for something at the end. Or Dominic said, you know, to double check results. We want to make it feel like the default, the table stakes to do both. And we want to make it obvious to users when Boolean is a better strategy and when machine learning conceptual query or some other type of query is a better strategy. Personally, I think categorization and, you know, classifying documents in a binary way or in tagging with multiple categories is a different type of workflow than like what we typically see in relativity patents is trying to get people to the part of a document that makes it easiest for them to decide whether it's relevant or not. There's other tools that do categorization really well, and we think relativity, you know, we do that in our other businesses and the litigation product we have. We don't do it as much yet in relativity patents, but I think it's interesting. So I hope that answered the question. I think in categorization workflows, there's at least in the litigation world, there's a very clear test for when you're done and how do you quality check it. I think it's something that we could bring to the patents product too over time. I know we're really at time. Tony, can I give my closing comment and then hand it back to the other? We're really close to time here.
Yeah, we are, and you know, it's pretty amazing. We just had a couple of people drop off. You know, these are the, you know, so everyone's stuck around. It's great. Everybody's been really engaged, and we've gotten lots and lots of questions. One quick comment, and I'm going to let you do that, and I think that we're gonna finish it up. You know, the comment with regards to the families. You know, the AI tool should have an exporting feature with columns for patent numbers, simple family numbers, and extended INPADOC numbers. Those are the three biggest ones that are used. If you have that as a minimum, and somehow within the industry, if those simple number IDs and those INPADOC IDs are all the same, that would make all this so much easier and smoother. And then one other thing, for FTO, especially if I did not find anything, it is important to be able to record exactly what was searched. Queries and database content. This is to Jane's discussion and topic, so that it can be referred to back at some point in the future. So, you know, again, the documentation of the history, you know, regardless is very important. So, okay, with that, again, I'm going to thank everybody in the audience for all those questions. Terrific. And let's have a few closing comments to keep everybody more or less on time.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. One was Tony's comment. So, you know, first of all, thank you to the audience and thank you to Tony. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is the most engaged audience like we see in all of the content webinars and meetups we do. Tony, your audience is super engaged, and it proved to us that there's a lot more hunger for better tools, and we're going to keep trying. I noticed the same thing. The audience count went up all the way through minute like 51 of this discussion, and it's still like we only lost 2. So that doesn't happen in webinars. It does not happen. So thank you. 2 is, you know, I said at the beginning, Jim and I hoped that we'd get 3 to 5, you know, really concrete things that we could improve in our product to make it. I wrote down 5 exactly. So, you know, mission accomplished. The last thing I'll say, little personal plug. I will be at the ILTACon conference in DC in a couple of weeks. If anyone hasn't seen Relativity Patents or wants to, I'll drop my email here in the chat or we'll follow up. But please reach out or find me on LinkedIn. I want to meet all of you in person. So who's next? Closing comments.
Dominic, go ahead.
I don't have anything to say. Thanks, Drew. That was fun. I'll see you in DC in a couple of weeks.
Jane?
And I'll say, yeah, thank you very much for the invite. I really enjoyed the discussion. I'm really happy that you're taking some ideas forward, and send me a free trial.
Yeah, there you go. Now, the survey, this time we only asked 3 questions. Would you like to be contacted by Relativity? Would you like to be contacted by Dominic? Or would you like to be contacted by Jane? Both Jane and Dominic are you know, own professional service companies and are available to assist with a variety of different things. They've generously donated their time. Of course, Relativity is our sponsor, and you know, they're doing as much, if not more, than anybody else in this field to make sure that our voices are heard. This is their 3rd webinar, and they've done focus groups too with our group. And so, you know, we really need to give them the opportunity to get our business and learn more. If anything today intrigued you, please go ahead and say, yes, I'd like to be contacted, and that'll show them how much this audience is really responding to them. with that, it is straight up 1 o'clock. And again, amazing session, amazing guests, amazing sponsor. Thanks everybody so much. And we'll see you in September. Bye now.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Jane, I'm going to get you that free trial.